Today is going to be a training about embracing our differences. It's a mind change. Throughout this training today, you'll have an opportunity to grasp a few, let's say, terminology that you don't usually use every day. Keeping in mind that this is an opportunity for you to take a look at yourself, examine diversity with respect to individuals from different races, religions, languages, genders, orientations, and other unique characteristics. The workshop is structured around the concept of awareness, acceptance, and respect. The workshop is based on the awareness approach to encourage each one of you to respect others in the classroom, in the workplace, and also in social settings. Embracing our differences, it's a mind change. This workshop will also provide an opportunity for you to explore your biases, as well as encourage respectful interpersonal communication. Due to the nature of this diversity training material content, you may feel a little discomfort. As we continue to promote the inclusiveness here at West Kentucky Community and Technical College and promoting a learning environment, as well as understanding the values of others' differences, this is an opportunity for you to examine your biases. I challenge each of you to be real, honest, as well as open-minded as possible. Step out of your safety zone and engage in the training activities. When we think about our identity as well as diversity, do they know your gender identity? What about your social economics? Do they see your attitude? What about your sexual orientation? Think about that. How does the world see you? Better yet, I'd like to challenge you today and say, how do you see the world? This is an opportunity for you to think about prejudice as it refers to preconceived opinions or feelings toward a person based solely upon their affiliation with a group. Is it all about your opinion or your viewpoint? What about discrimination? That comes into play when one acts upon a prejudice regarding that certain group of people. It's all based on your actions. Sometimes, do you ever stop and think about your action? Sometimes, do you ever witness someone else's action? Well, again, today, it's an opportunity for you to take a look at your biases. And that is the tendency to lean into a certain direction in favor of or against. It's all about your assumptions. And those assumptions come oftentimes from very young ages, based on your environment, based on what you've been told. And if that's all you know, then it is based on your assumption. Can we change those assumptions? Well, we're going to talk about some unconscious biases. Those are implicit biases. They refer to the attitude and stereotypes that affect the understanding, the action, and the decisions in our subconscious manners. Usually those actions are spontaneous. The explicit biases, they refer to the attitude we have about a person or a group on a conscious level. Those actions are deliberate. Don't sit here today and think that you're excluded from any of the biases, because guess what? We all have them. I don't know how many of you all really have heard about biases or know about biases or realize your own biases. So this is going to be an opportunity for you to take a look at yourself, and this is going to allow you to be honest. We're going to have a little activity here. What I'm going to do is pass out these folded pieces of paper. Please do not unfold the paper. Do not share what's on your paper with anyone else. And in just a few minutes, you'll have an opportunity to open up the paper, read it. I'm going to ring a bell, and at that time, you will respond to what's on your paper. Then we'll take a little bit of time and discuss and talk about what's on the paper and what your response is, so that you'll know everybody in here has biases. Okay, I'm going to ring the bell. You read what's on your paper, and then I'm going to ring the bell again, and then you're going to write your response. Okay? Your first response that comes to your mind. Don't sit and think about a lot of things. The first response. Go ahead and read. First response, please write it on your paper. Okay, I'm going to share what was on my paper. A father and son were involved in a car accident in which the father was killed and the son was seriously injured. The father was pronounced dead at the scene of the accident, and his body was taken to a local morgue. The son was taken by ambulance to a nearby hospital and was immediately wheeled into an emergency operating room. A surgeon was called. Upon arrival and seeing the patient, the attending surgeon exclaimed, "Oh, that's my son! He's my son!" Can you explain this? I know by now, if you haven't looked at your neighbor, everybody got the same father and son story. So let's just take some time here and share some of your first responses by show of hand, whoever, and we'll call on you. Okay, Tammy.
The doctor is a woman, it's his mother.
Somebody else? Anybody else?
Could involve adoptive versus biological father or be a homosexual couple.
Anybody else?
It could be his stepson.
Anybody else? I'm going to challenge you to come out of your comfort zone, because I know when you read the story that you had a first response. So I'd like for you to share those if you would, because it gives us an opportunity to really understand unconscious biases. So, thank you.
Well, certainly with a first response with no, I said no. Then when I have a few seconds to think about it, I could rationalize some other things. But saying no, the first very first response is thinking that both are the men. So, I wouldn't think about a mother. But after a few seconds, yeah, I could think of other scenarios. But immediately I thought 2 men, the word being son in each, although it was a father, so that was, first response was no.
Out of a group of about, I'm going to say it's at least 75 to 100 of us in here, we've got more comments about our father and son.
My first inclination was that it may be a godson.
Was that you? Okay. Anybody else?
My first thought was, of course, adoption. Like maybe there was an adoption involved. And then the second one was maybe he just made a mistake and thought he looked like his own son. So.
Anybody else? Well, all of the responses that we received certainly is a great example of everybody's unconscious biases. When you say, well, I thought maybe it was a male, then we were excluding possibly a female. When we say that it was maybe the father's partner, then we're opening and understanding that people make choices and that we're living in a society now that people have different sexual orientations and their decisions as far as their choices. So we're opening up to various types of awareness here. So any other comments on the father and son? Now I want to bring things a little closer to home here at West Kentucky Community and Technical College, a place that we come to every day to work, Monday through Friday. We count on our students, really, to help us keep our jobs. Students come to us from many, many walks of life, from a diverse population. But when they walk through the doors here at the college, into admissions, financial aid, advising, business office, bookstore, into your classroom and other various offices, what is the first thing that comes across your mind when you see students that do not look like you? As I shared with you earlier, there are parts of this training, and there are going to be moments that you're going to feel uncomfortable. But oftentimes, if we do not feel it, it does not make a difference. Today is making a difference because it's going to give you an opportunity to embrace some differences. But at the end of the day, it's a mind change that's going to make that difference. As you can see up on the screen, we're going to talk a little bit about microaggressions. Those microaggression messages are based off of your biases, but microaggression messages are like paper cuts. Not just one paper cut, but 1,000. And we have all experienced a paper cut. When you look at the individuals that's before you, and they are sharing some messages that they received from individuals that saw them, would you have some of these same messages to say to an individual? So you are Chinese, right? Why would you think someone would say that to this individual? Any comments? That maybe all that person knows. Any other comments? Why would you think someone would say, so you're Chinese, right? Based on what she looks like. Could be her name. You don't have to answer this, but I'm going to dig a little deep here. Would that be your first response to that individual? Let's move on. We have an individual here in the middle. And this is how he feels. The limited representation of my race in your classroom does not make me the voice of all black people. Why would you think this individual would feel that way? Any comments? Yes. Okay, because he's the only black person in the class, and so the question would be is, what do you think about, how do you think black people would feel about that? Okay. Okay, I'm going to ask you, would that individual be talking about you, thinking that? Today is an opportunity for you to take a look at yourself as well as your friends, your family, and colleagues. The individual on the right, are you even legal? Why would you think someone would ask her that? I see right now that everybody's very comfortable with where they are. This is one of these trainings and topics that should make you uncomfortable. And I'm going to tell you why. Because we're all human. And we all have unconscious biases. And I know oftentimes when we get in large groups, it's hard to share your innermost feelings about things because we tend to judge each other. We tend to continue to watch each other after we hear that somebody says something that we don't always agree with, if it has something to do with microaggressions or your spontaneous remarks or your deliberate remarks. Well, I'm going to say to you, even if you do not respond outward throughout this training, just being exposed to this material and information, it will give you a chance to take a look at yourself and also have an opportunity to have a conversation with someone else. The most important part about what we're going through today is awareness and making a difference. As I stated to you, and I will continue to state to you, I know this material can make individuals very uncomfortable. It's not a bad thing. But in order for us to make this institution here a more welcoming environment for our students to not only enroll here, but want to stay here, it is very important that we have these kind of conversations. We have some more individuals up here, and one says, somebody said to her, I don't see color. Does that mean you don't see me? Now, I'm going to stand here right before you today as an African-American woman, and I'm going to tell you I've experienced that. For someone to stand in front of me and tell me I don't see you as a black person is very disrespectful. So what are you telling me? You do not value who I am? I don't have a place here? What is the message? What I'm sharing with you today is what's real. Things are happening. We do experience microaggressions. We experience them in the classrooms. We experience them in the community. We experience them just anywhere that we go. And they're not always racial microaggression messages. And as we move further on into the training, you'll be exposed to various other microaggression messages. But until we understand how hurtful and painful our messages can be, then we're not going to make a difference in the students that we serve here, in our colleagues that sit next to us, our friends, or within our community. But we have to start somewhere. And today is a great day to start. If nothing else, as I stated, just being aware.
Trying to intentionally not be biased to someone and not being disrespectful just because we don't know what to say.
Thank you. And that opens the door. I appreciate that. Let me say to you that our biases are based on where we grew up. They're learned. But the biggest part is, are you an individual in a position to say, I am in a position to learn and understand more? Now, me, I am in a position to have these conversations, uncomfortable conversations, not to create argument, but at the end to learn to appreciate the differences of others. So sometimes when you know you make comments and you can catch yourself, it's okay to say, you know what, this may have offended you, but maybe you can help me so that I don't offend somebody else, okay? The person being offended can say, you know, maybe you don't understand, and maybe I can help you understand because based on just your content knowledge. Those are those difficult conversations that we shy away from. And I'm going to tell you that is why when you start talking about diversity and these other topics that have to do with biases, discrimination, people stay away from those conversations because it puts them in a very, very compromising position. But what I want everybody to take away today is be open to learning more about somebody else's preferences, experiences, lifestyles, with a sense, a very high sense and action of intention, of respect. I watch my colleagues on this campus walk around and not even speak to either each other or someone of a different color. Why is that so? Oftentimes, sometimes people are just in their own zone, okay? Or I really don't know what to say. Or looking at somebody's facial expressions, and I'm not going to approach them. I'm hold my head down, hope they keep theirs down. Okay? There's someone behind me. Oh, they don't look like me. Wonder what they're up to. Okay? Because we're judging instead of stopping and saying, "How are you today?" We have to put ourselves in position, colleagues, to make everybody here feel comfortable. This is our home that we're opening up the door to any and everybody that want to be here enrolled so that they can make this their home as well. But we can't do that if we're running around tight and holding on to our biases when we know that those thoughts are not right. Changing is not going to happen overnight. But the biggest part is putting yourself in a position to say, I am willing to make a change in my mind. That's where it all starts. And we as employees of West Kentucky Community and Technical College are feeling various ways with our biases. Please do not think that our students do not feel it or see it or hear it, because they do. It is critical that we focus on keeping our enrollment up, because if we do not, we will not be sitting here and having to talk about anybody's biases. Whatever we need to do to embrace the differences of others for this mind change is critical. And understanding that we have students that are different than we are. And I'm going to bring it a little bit closer to home to you. We have colleagues that are different than we are. I'm going to turn it over to Gabby. She can introduce herself. She is my co-presenter, and I'll let her talk about LGBTQ.
Hello, my name is Gabriella. I use she, hers pronouns, and I'm the outreach advocate at Lotus. We were formerly PASAC, so maybe you know us by that old name. We're the Children's Advocacy and Sexual Violence Resource Center serving the 8 counties of the Purchase area. We focus on supporting survivors of violence through advocacy. And we also want to empower the community to have the education that they need to address violence in their communities. So for me, a big part of that is talking about diversity. So we are equipped with terminology and education to just help create a better, safer environment, more diverse environment for folks. So my presentation is we're just going to take a look at some terminology. I know a lot of the times it can be confusing. Things like sex, orientation, and gender are kind of used interchangeably. So I'm going to go over a really cute visual tool that should be in front of y'all called the Gender Unicorn to just kind of help straighten those definitions in your mind. And we're also going to talk about the importance of pronouns. Gender pronouns is something that you're hearing more and more of just out in the news and in society and the community. So we're going to touch a little bit on that as well. So I really love the Gender Unicorn because it's a really easy visual tool to help explain some different terminologies. And I like it because it was created by TSER, the Trans Student Education Resource Network. And I think it's really important to empower young people who have these identities to help kind of teach us what they're seeing on the ground in terms of what these different definitions mean to them and to folks in the community. So I like to start with sex assigned at birth because it is the first instance of gender and sex when a baby is born. So when a baby is born, what is the first thing that you tend to hear? Yeah, thank you. That's the first thing you hear. So that's the first instance of just kind of realizing that the second somebody is born, people, doctors, people in general try to put bodies and people into these really rigid boxes of male and female. And we'll go over why these assumptions, like Shavine had mentioned, has a lot of psychological and physical harm a lot of the times. So when a baby is born and you assign sex to them, that is based on like external genitalia. So you kind of take a look at the baby's body and say, okay, this body is what I assume is a male body or a female body. have folks heard of the third kind of sex classification of intersex? If y'all have, so this is where externally maybe a child's genitals don't fit into these neat little boxes of what we imagine genitals of males and females to look like. That can be external. That can be your internal organs maybe don't match, if that makes sense. So you have ovaries, but something on the inside, but something that would be considered a penis on the outside. Or even your chromosomes have XY and XX throughout, like you have a mix of these. So these bodies don't fit into our typical boxes of male and female. And this is where I really like to point out that there are a lot of harmful consequences of trying to put people in these boxes. I don't know how many folks are aware, but first of all, if you know a natural born redhead, you probably know somebody who's intersex. There's no correlation between the two, but babies are born at around the same rate as having red hair than intersex, but we really try to hide that. So historically, babies who have been seen as intersex have been subjected to really painful corrective surgeries and medical treatments that without their consent, it turns out to be very, very harmful. It can cause physical side effects, and once you realize that your body is so shameful that doctors want to change it or would want to not talk about it, it can cause a lot of emotional scars as well. People have had a lot of mental health issues and have committed suicide, have attempted suicide when they have found out that throughout their entire lives they've had medical processes done to them, all to change their body to fit into a box that was predetermined. So the Intersex Society of North America has a lot of really good resources on that if you'd like to learn more. But that's the first instance of sex in gender at birth. And then I like to go into gender identity. That is like a cultural understanding of personality traits, body types, assumptions that all go into these neat little boxes of male and female. But bodies are very diverse, people are very diverse, so it's important to expand our idea of what that means. So what I like about the unicorn is it has multiple kind of lines, so you can be a certain amount of female and woman while at the same time having different amounts of male traits or identities. So it allows for the fluidity that we see in bodies and people's personalities and identities. The reason that they separate gender expression from gender identity is, like Shaveen had mentioned, just by looking at somebody, you don't know how they identify. You can see how they express themselves through clothing or haircuts or their mannerisms or the language they use. But that doesn't correlate with a specific identity. For many trans people or people who deviate from what is assigned to them at birth, it may not be safe to express their gender in a way that they would like, because there's a lot of violence out there for people who kind of deviate from that norm. So just by looking at somebody's somebody's expression doesn't necessarily mean that you know how they identify. And at the bottom, we talk about sexuality, but I like to use orientation instead, because there's a breakdown between sexual orientation and romantic orientation. So there can be somebody that you're physically attracted to, but you don't necessarily want to date them or have a romantic feeling towards them. So what I like about that, the way that the unicorn explains it, is there's different lines for you can have a sexual attraction towards one gender, but a romantic attraction towards another gender. And the little like dots they have on the left side means that you don't have to experience sexual attraction at all. You don't have to experience romantic attraction at all. And you don't even have to put a name to your gender identity, or you can have fluidity in your gender expression, if that makes sense. So what I like about this is it just opens up the conversation to move away from those really, really rigid boxes we tend to think of, and just embrace the fluidity and diversity of people's identities. So pronouns is really, really important, especially if you are in the classroom. I don't know if a lot of y'all are in the classroom, but that's something that we're encountering a lot more in society. So pronouns are basically what you use when you talk about somebody in the third person. So if I was not in a room and you wanted to talk about me, you might want to say, oh, she has just left the room. So in the English language, most of the pronouns that we use are gendered, so she or he. And then someone's name may have a gender kind of attached to it as well. But it's important to not make assumptions about what somebody's gender or what somebody's pronoun is, just by looking at what they look like or how they present. So they, them, theirs is a gender-neutral pronoun that is in use more frequently. We see it nowadays. AM, airs, and Z, here, here's is another one that isn't as common or isn't seen as much, but is still one that is widely used within the community. And then someone may choose to have just their name as a pronoun, so they don't have a specific one, they just want to use their name. And I'm going to go over a little bit about why it's important to really respect someone's pronouns when they tell you what that pronoun is, simply because it is their name and pronoun. So my name is Gabriella. So if you called me something completely different, that would be disrespectful, because that's not the name I'm telling you is my name, if that makes sense. And it's the easiest way to show respect. Transgender people or people in the LGBTQ community in general face a lot of violence, interpersonal, from people they encounter, even just kind of microaggressions like Shavine had mentioned, all the way up to no protections in housing, no protections in employment, and those kinds of things. So their rate of suicide within the community is very high, and specifically in the trans community. 40% of trans folks in their lifetime will attempt suicide at least once, and using correct names and pronouns is suicide prevention, to just be straight about what it is. The University of Texas at Austin did a study that found out if you use a transgender young person's correct names and pronouns, that will reduce their rate of suicide attempts by 65%. It will also reduce symptoms of depression and symptoms of self-harm. So these have real-life consequences in terms of if someone's pronoun, if they tell you what their pronoun is and their name, it's important to use it, to be respectful. So we know what gender neutral pronouns exist, and we know why it's important. So how do we go about using them? When I came up to the front, I told y'all my name is Gabriella and I use she, her, hers pronouns. It's as easy as when you introduce yourself in a meeting or in a presentation or at work. Just throw in your pronouns as well if you feel comfortable. And that's an easy way to normalize speaking about it. If you have name tags in meetings or those kinds of things, I always put my pronouns at the end of my name as well. So if you're going to use somebody's pronouns, if you're going to talk about them in third person, it's important to ask if you're not sure. If you think they might have a pronoun that is different from what the assumption would be, you can go ahead and ask, what are your pronouns, if I may ask. And someone may not feel comfortable sharing or may not know what pronouns are, but again, it's important to normalize that conversation. In asking about pronouns, especially with young people, with students who may not be out or who may still be exploring their identity, it's important to ask as well, especially for teachers, do you want me to use this pronoun when we're alone together talking? Do you want me to use this pronoun when we're in a classroom? If y'all ever have a chance to talk to these young people's parents or friends, do you want me to use specific pronouns? Just because it can be very unsafe to use a certain pronoun if the person's not out. Before Lotus, I worked with LGBTQ kids where a teacher would use a pronoun that wasn't safe to be used outside of the classroom, and it ended up with the young person losing their house, being kicked out of their home because they use a gender-neutral pronoun that other people, the young person had not disclosed that yet to the other person. And even if the young person is not in the room, yes. Sure. So I spoke to some professors earlier this month, and a suggestion I had is, I think the most important thing is to start normalizing just speaking about it. And even if you get the wrong pronoun, you help create a culture where, okay, you got my pronoun wrong, I'm gonna tell you that it's wrong and I'm gonna give you a correction. So if you're a teacher, it's a good idea to put on the end of your syllabus, if you want to talk to me or send me an email about what your pronoun is, and if it's something important to you, go ahead and send me an email, or you can talk to me after class just to normalize that conversation. What I like to do when I use somebody's pronouns that I have not met before, I use they, because it's a very safe, neutral. And if they say, well, my pronouns are actually she, I'll go ahead and use that. But for a lot of people in the LGBTQ community who are really used to talking about pronouns, using they for somebody you don't know is a very good safe bet. And if they go ahead and correct you, say thank you, I'll use that other pronoun from now on for this person. But it's just about normalizing, because it can be very hurtful when you're in a space where people aren't willing to have those conversations. So just normalizing the conversation is what I would say. The first thing I'll say is if you're talking to somebody, then it's in second person, not third person, so you don't need pronouns. But if you're meeting them for the first time, you can say, oh, hey, my name is whatever. I'm going to be advocating for you, or this is my job at the school, and my pronouns are whatever your pronouns are. And if they want to share their pronouns with you, then that will open the door for them to share it with you, if that makes sense. So points to remember, like you said, it's all about practicing and continuing to learn and being open to if somebody corrects you or if you slip up or something like that. It's all about practicing. When you use the wrong pronoun for somebody, it's fine to just correct yourself and move on. A lot of the times people tend to kind of dwell on an apology. When you say, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean it, I don't see you that way, I'm so sorry, I'll try better next time, it can be kind of difficult for the other person to kind of be like, it's okay, no problem, I believe you. So if you just say thank you and move on, that normalizes it and just creates a more comfortable environment for everybody in the room. And then the last point, really important, like I had mentioned, some people use different pronouns in different spaces because they're not out in certain spaces, or it's not a very comfortable or safe space to be out. So just be also cognizant of that. So when someone shares their pronoun with you in the classroom or when you meet with them, you can go ahead and say, do you want me to use those pronouns with you everywhere or only in specific instances?
So to help you digest this, I have my handy dandy friendly diversity ball. Okay? And it's a thumb ball. So if I toss this ball to you, then whatever little patch your thumb is on, and you will have two thumbs, so you'll get to choose, okay? Left thumb, right thumb. And there are various questions on here, and this will kind of help you loosen up and come out of your comfort zone. I'm not the best thrower, but I'll try not to hit you in the head. This is a very, very soft ball here. But if you see it coming your way, please raise your hand. Then read what's on your little patch, and please share with us. Hold on just a minute.
Share a situation when you were in the minority. I guess right now maybe, because I'm brand new. I'm teaching just 1 credit hour of FYE, so I've never taught before. Not a teacher, so this is a whole new experience for me. So I feel a little bit, a little out of place, but I like it here. So. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Careful at this time.
Hold on.
Oh, okay. How can you promote? How can your community promote acceptance of differences? One of the things, as I can speak for myself anyway, is I have had to learn to just take ownership of whatever I do, and if it's wrong, I'll be like, all right, thanks for letting me know. I'll try to do better in the future. But and a lot of times if somebody chooses to say something, to share something with me, I'm like, okay, cool. How can I help? But I'm not really sure otherwise how to.
When did you first become aware of racial or ethnic differences? In 6th grade, because I had the first African-American female educator in McCracken County.
Recount a time you felt like an outsider. Strangely enough, I would say when I played sports. I played basketball in high school, but I never felt like I was in the in crowd. And it was because, this is so weird since this is a diversity class. The ball players that I played sports with would always pick on band members at lunch, and that completely offended me because those band members were also my friends, as well as art students because I took art. And so even though I played sports, I didn't run with the sports crowd because I didn't feel like their behaviors were appropriate. So I felt like an outsider inside my own club.
So mine is, in what ways can we support people with physical disabilities? So we can support people with physical disabilities by making accommodations for them and making those accommodations not be obvious. So if you always have a table in a classroom in which a wheelchair could be pulled up, as opposed to waiting until the last minute to discover that you have a student who needs that accommodation, and then making a big deal of dragging in tables or chairs.
What early message did you receive about your identity? Oh, goodness. I guess I was always kind of running outside with the boys, but it never, you kind of get called a tomboy for playing outside and wanting to play in the mud and the dirt and run around. So I didn't like dresses.
How might you personally combat prejudice and discrimination? Well, if there's something that's inappropriate, you need to speak up.
Ask for the bump. You want to toss? Want me?
I'll let you.
Oh, no. Okay, here we go.
How might you personally combat prejudice and discrimination? You have to, first of all, I think everybody needs to stay educated on things that may not only affect them but affect other people. How could you personally combat it? You have to know exactly who you are, stay true to who you are, embrace that, and then I think everybody will be good from that.
You want to toss?
I'll toss.
Okay. How do your thoughts about diversity differ from your parents? Well, I can say that both of my parents were from a small rural community, and their parents were from a small rural community, so their environment was not very diverse. I was born in Paducah, and I was brought up in the Paducah City School System and graduated from Tillman and went to UK. My environment was very diverse my entire life. So that's how it's different, and I'm thankful for it.
How do you respond to jokes that are demeaning or derogatory? I guess I just tell them that's not acceptable in my classroom. We've got a pretty strict policy in our classrooms about how you can speak.
A time you shared an unpopular idea. Where do I begin? Open enrollment, PPE, no. Yeah, I met with the nursing faculty on Wednesday. No, I'm just kidding. Honest to goodness, I couldn't even give you a time because I feel like my life is sharing unpopular ideas. But I would say in doing that, you have to recognize and know that what you're sharing, other people are not necessarily going to agree with, and you have to be okay with that. And you have to be okay with listening to their feedback and them allowing them the opportunity to be able to say, I don't like that. I don't agree with it. I think there's a better way of doing things, and not take it personally.
I call it sharing the patches of the diversity ball, which is a true example of how you can get engaged in some of those very difficult, complex conversations. So, but what I want to do now is give you an opportunity to hear from some students about some of their real life situations that they have encountered as we talk a little bit more about the microaggressions, and this will bring it home a little bit closer to you. You do have handouts in front of you, and they're examples of microaggressions in the classroom, as well as recognizing the microaggression messages and the messages that they send. So take a look at this.
When someone said something about some aspect of your identity that made you feel insulted or slighted, even if they didn't intend it, you probably experienced a microaggression.
A microaggression is something that someone says to someone else without knowing that it may be offensive.
It hurts. So that's how I know it's a microaggression, because it feels disrespectful.
And it's not like outright racism, but it's something that is like almost unconscious in the way that you view people.
Most microaggressions are subtle and indirect, but they occur frequently in the daily interactions of members of historically underrepresented groups. And most often, people who commit microaggressions think of themselves as well-intentioned, non-racist, non-sexist people. They do not realize that the underlying messages communicated by their actions or comments are hurtful to other people.
One of my friends asked if my parents had their papers. I had a science teacher, a physics teacher, and he told me that I was the smartest black girl in his class. I've been asked if I understood what they were talking about, or like, do you need any translation and stuff just based on my name?
Like, I'm not the spokesperson for the whole black community, but that's a microaggression I do experience a lot. Like, they want the black perspective, and I'm usually the only black girl in the class. So it's like, okay, what's your take on this?
Oftentimes I get asked, do you know how to speak your native language? And when I answer I do, it's just like, they're like, okay, well, what does Ching Chao mean?
There are 3 types of microaggressions: micro-assaults, micro-insults, and micro-invalidations. A micro-assault is similar to what we think of as overt discrimination. In the case of micro-assaults, those acts are intentional.
I was a server for a long time, and if anyone else was, you know this. In the back of the kitchen, when someone gets a table of, say, Indian people, I hope this is PC, I don't know all the terms, but Indian people or black people or anyone, they'd be like, who wants that table? I don't want it, they're not gonna tip. And my heart would break every time.
I used to be a server too, and I hated it because I was the only person of any type of race other than white. I remember coming in and they'd be like, oh, Danielle, you get that table of raccoons. And I was like, what? And they were like, yeah. And then I would go and I'm like, they're black people. And I was like, wait, is that what you call black people? You call them raccoons?
A micro-assault can be the deliberate posting of swastikas, Confederate flags, racial slurs or epithets that are left on a blackboard in a classroom.
I work as a research assistant, and so a while ago, one of the our new RAs, when I was a few months into it, came up to me and just mentioned that even though we'd known each other for months at that point, you're the least scary black guy I've ever met. In the way that I dress, the way that I talk, the way that I speak, I've kind of tailored that over the course of my education to be non-threatening.
I will literally have my keys in my hand, they're always with me, and I'll just jingle them as I'm walking so that they know that I know that I'm there, so that we both know that I'm right here and I'm not gonna try and do anything to be stupid. But on that note, there's also the stigma that like we're aggressive and intimidating.
It's sad you have to make sure you let people know you're not a threat, and that's the objective.
One of my friends commented to me, he said, you know, I don't really even think you're black, you know, you're, and I was like, what? I was like, what do you mean? He's like, I mean, you're smart, you do your work, yes, you're athletic, but you do your work, you're smart. So I don't really know if you're black. I was like, I didn't understand. It made me question who I was and if I was still a part of the culture.
And that's an example of micro invalidation and a micro insult. And I'm going to talk about those a little bit more. A micro insult is a comment that communicates the demographic group is not respected, that that person is a slight exception to the stereotype. It's an insult, even though the perpetrator thinks he has just rendered a compliment.
Well, here at UNT, I've heard, you're so pretty for a black girl. I feel like it discounts me as a person, and then I feel like it discounts my race. I feel like you can be pretty just because you're a woman, or, you know, or all black women are beautiful, all people of color are beautiful, just the same as people that are not people of color. So for them to make that specific statement, that's what I'm like, why, what in you made you say that to me? As if it were a compliment.
So another type of micro insult is when students in the classroom are dismissed or treated almost as if they're invisible. For instance, in some of our sciences or engineering classes, there are few women, and professors often don't call on those women.
I had one instance in a statistics-based class where we were discussing something bell curve related, and he presented a question, and I don't remember exactly what the answer was, but I answered it, and he kind of doubted me, and he very condescendingly was just like, oh, okay, well, I mean, like, this is the best answer, but I guess your answer could be right. You know what, we'll ask, it was a grad student, he was like, you know what, we'll ask Dr. So-and-so and see what he thinks the best answer is. And there was no apology or anything. He was just like, oh yeah, Dr. So-and-so said that, yeah, that was actually a really acceptable answer. And I was just like, okay. What else is he gonna doubt me on, and when else am I gonna be called out in front of 70 other people, you know, and have a weird exchange that makes the whole room quiet? Like,
one of my science classes, my teacher had asked what I wanted to do, and I told the teacher that I wanted to be a psychiatrist, and immediately they're like, that's too hard for you, maybe you should try a different field, or have you ever thought about being a nurse practitioner? Nurse practitioners in psychiatry make pretty well, they make a lot of money too. Have you thought about that? Like, why go to med school?
Genuinely, sometimes somebody might feel like they can't make it, you know, and then when you continue to tell them that, it does hurt, you know.
I've had a lot of professors tell me to my face that they were surprised that I was as good as a student as I was, and that I paid attention in class and actually participated. And when I asked why, they said, well, you know, you just come off as a troublemaker. You have all these piercings and short hair as a girl and tattoos, and we just naturally assumed that you weren't really going to be any good.
Another type of micro insult is when a professor says to a student, wow, you speak really good English. The message is, the professor thinks I don't really belong here, or that I'm not really American. Of course I speak good English. I was born in the United States. But the professor sees a Latina or an Asian and makes the assumption that that person is foreign, or at least that is what the target hears. What is the underlying message when somebody asks if you're legal?
That you don't belong to this country.
That you don't belong, that's right.
We were walking in the gym once, and I was a guest, so I had to hand the person my ID, and he was looking at my name and everything. He's like, what are you? And I was like, well, what are you asking? He's like, what nationality are you? I was like, okay, I'm Lebanese, I'm Arab.
He's like, you got one of those that blow things up, are you? No offense though. What kind of crazy stuff
Yeah.
you ask someone? You get what I'm saying?
And I was just really surprised. Like, totally blew my mind that someone would think that.
The assumptions I get the most is that I'm very academic and that I'm very good at math. When they assume stuff like that, it makes me feel like they're taking the individual out of who I am and just assuming that all the people who look like me act like me, and that kind of makes me feel lesser of what I can do.
The teacher was asking if someone could translate something in Spanish because he was giving an example and he needed this one word to be translated in Spanish. And he just stared at me specifically when he was asking, and I knew we were making eye contact because after, I just stayed quiet because I was like, I'm pretty sure there's other people in this class that know Spanish, but he just kept staring at me. And at some point, the rest of the class turned to look at me, waiting for a response. And I was like, I'm not gonna give you guys an answer. This is not okay.
Our teacher pulled me aside because they were doing something for Christmas, like Toys for Tots or something. And he had this bicycle. They had a bicycle they were gonna give to the kids, and he came up to me and was like, hey, I need to switch out the seats on this bike, and it seems like somebody like you would know how to do that. So if you could just change it out for me, that'd be great. And so I was like, oh, okay, sure, not really thinking much of it. And then later on, I kind of thought to myself, that's odd. Why would he assume that I knew personally how to switch, a bike seat? So I thought that was an odd kind of maybe a micro insult on the fact that he assumed just because maybe I'm Latino that I'm good with my hands or something like that.
A micro-invalidation is a comment or action that dismisses the experiences of historically disadvantaged group members. Micro-invalidations can happen when, for instance, when a student is lamenting that she wishes there were more Latina faculty, for instance, and the students in the class start rolling their eyes or, oh, come on, get over it. And the professor goes along with the students instead of with the person who made the lament. Another type of micro-invalidation, one that we hear a lot about today, is being colorblind. When people say, I don't notice you're black. I don't notice you're Latina. I don't see color. What does that mean? How do you interpret that? What are people saying when they say, I don't notice your race, I don't see color? How do you interpret that?
They're just trying to say that they're not racist, that they don't look at that side of you and they just want to validate you as a person, but it comes off wrong because it's like your race is very much who you are as an individual.
In a lot of my mini classes, I have to do writings, and it's just professors seem to be don't want to hurt my feelings because I'm an international student, so mine is not that good, especially with my writing. So they let me go easy, I just feel like they have different expectations for international student and just American students. And a lot of feedback that I get from my writings is just not very meaningful, because I just feel like they just try not to hurt my feelings, try to go easy on me. But then by doing that, I just feel like it takes toll on my development, my learning, my writing, and art stuff.
So what do you do if you are not the person who commits the microaggression as the professor? What if someone else in the classroom commits it?
What I usually do is I name it. When I hear it in the room, a microaggression that a student says, it may not be directed to a particular student, but there are probably students in the room who will feel as if they have been microaggressed against. I will name that. I think we've just had a difficult comment made that not everybody's comfortable with. What are people feeling in the room right now? Did anyone feel uncomfortable with that? And then if there's silence, which there oftentimes is because people are uncomfortable about calling each other on things, I will talk about what it is that I heard. I will model the behavior of instigating a difficult dialogue. And usually once I do that, then people will come back.
The impact on students that can be harmful is that it creates an uncomfortable environment or climate. It can be very stressful. Some of the research shows that it can affect people's health because of the stress. But I think one of the big things is that you just don't feel like you belong or are included. And, you know, especially when we're trying to create a campus where diversity is valued and where everybody feels included, they get in the way of that goal.
Just recently, I caught myself making one, and as soon as the words came out of my mouth, I realized that I had made this exact mistake that I was just talking about, like overgeneralizing to an entire group or class of people. And I saw tears well up in her eyes. And I said, I'm so sorry. I am absolutely positive that I have said something to hurt you. And I think I know why. But I would really like to hear from your perspective what just happened here.
So common microaggressions committed by faculty in the classroom include the following: mispronouncing students' names after they have repeatedly corrected you, referring to students by the wrong pronouns, calling on men while ignoring women in class discussions, or calling only on white students and ignoring the students of color in your classroom, scheduling tests or projects during religious or cultural holidays. Be aware of assigning projects that disregard socioeconomic status. Be aware of using heterosexist examples in class. When professors give heteronormative examples, atoms attract like males and females, or there's an assumption of bring your girlfriend or bring your boyfriend, an assumption that you're heterosexual. We make an assumption that heterosexuals are the normal people.
One of the biggest things is pronouns when it comes to transgendered people, individuals, because sometimes they'll tell you, hey, I prefer these pronouns, and when a person doesn't choose to go by, female pronouns or male pronouns, it invalidates their person.
A little thing with the misgendering thing, everyone messes up, it's okay. If you do misgender like me or someone else that's trans, or even someone that's cis, just like apologize and move on. Don't make the apology about yourself, but just like say, oh, I'm sorry, correct yourself, and then move on. Don't make it a constant thing though, because we'll pick up on that. So yeah, just a little side note on that.
As a faculty member, you are responsible for the climate in that classroom. You, the professor, the faculty member, are responsible for every single person's sense of belonging in that classroom. You are responsible for every person's opportunity to learn.
I think in a broader spectrum, we have to get to know each other or just not make assumptions. People don't realize that we are a lot more alike than we are different.
People say that for other people, like you're so black or you're so Mexican, you're so Asian. And to me, that takes away from who I am as a person, even though it groups and stereotypes me with other people. And I don't like when people do that.
It makes you feel like you shouldn't be who you are. It makes you feel like they're basically trying to tell you that you should be doing something else. Like they're not able to accept you for the person that you are and the person you're trying to show them that you are. Instead, they're just telling you like, oh, that's not right. That's not a good fit. And I mean, nobody wants to feel that way. Everybody wants to feel, accepted for who they are, no matter, what situation they're put in.
What you have experienced was a YouTube video on microaggressions in the classroom with a student from University of North Texas that were enrolled spring 2017 in the courses Introduction to Social Psychology, Psychology of Race in the U.S., and Critical Race Psychology Research Team. I think those comments that the students made wraps up a lot. Today was an opportunity for us to become aware of what different ones are experiencing, taking a look at ourselves. All we can do is start out just on the top of the surface here. But it will take us as individuals to kind of start scratching that surface and digging deeper within ourselves. No one else can do that but you. So as we continue to embrace the differences of others, I continue to encourage you to have these complex, difficult conversations. I challenge you to look beyond your thoughts and embrace the cultural landscape that's out there that can teach us far much more than we could ever imagine. I also encourage you to be very respectful to others as you continue being who you are. This training is kind of based on awareness, just being aware that others are different. Acceptance, that you can't change people. The only person you can change is yourself, so accept that. And respect. That is so critical as we continue to grow and embrace the awareness of being different. And at the end of the day, it's a mind change. As we get to the end of this particular session, I would like to open up the room and give you an opportunity to debrief, and let's have a discussion.
One of the first things that was brought up is if someone would say, I don't see color. So I'm thinking the message would have been someone saying, I respect you, I see you as a colleague, as another professor. How best could you convey to someone, or should we just ignore it? It seems like ignoring is not the way to do it. What is the best way?
First, I would like to answer that by saying when an individual says, I don't see color, oftentimes they don't know what else to say. Sometimes that's a way of people saying, I want to be your friend. Do you accept me? Sometimes it's all they know. So my recommendation would be for the individual receiving that message, instead of really being offended, use it as a teachable moment and say, you know what, but I'm no different than you are. And explore a little bit more and say, so tell me a little bit about where you grew up. Did you not see any other people of color? Try to see where some of that stems from and embrace the conversation. And then sometimes it could be a very negative. I'm not going to say that they're all innocent comments, because they're not. It is stated that a lot of microaggressions are jabs. And here again, like it was stated, that microaggressions are like a paper cut. And sometimes that's some people's way of not being very nice. But use it as a teachable moment. And even once an individual says that, then they don't mean any harm, then say, I really don't mean any harm, but I don't really see color, or I have other black friends. But be willing to say after that, but no negative intent here. But I just want you to know, you are an individual I would like to get to know. There are 1,000 different ways to proceed with that comment, but I encourage you to have some positive dialogue around it. And the worst thing we can do as individuals is walk away, especially if you're in a friendly situation, is walk away with a negative attitude about it, okay? Be the bigger person that want to grow and enhance your diverse awareness to have a conversation, because that's an opportunity because it's out on the table.
I have a related question. I would have also thought, your question, I think that statement is usually meant to say, I'm not prejudiced, or I don't want to be prejudiced. And I didn't realize until talking with some younger people recently that now that expression is taken as, I ignore your color, I ignore your race. I don't see the things that might have been difficult in your life or might be difficult in your life because of that. I'm just ignoring that whole aspect of how your life might be affected in positive or negative ways. And I was surprised because I didn't know that the meaning of that statement had changed to something that was like the opposite of what you were trying to say. And so I just wonder if there are any other common expressions that are outdated now that used to mean something positive, but now don't mean that anymore.
I don't understand when someone says that they don't see color, and this is why I don't understand it. If I'm not in my office today, I spoke to you yesterday. You come in, you say, hey, spoke to a guy yesterday in admissions. There's 2 guys in there. You're gonna say, black dude, clear glasses. So you clearly know what color I am. So when someone's like, well, I don't see color. I'm black, I see color. I can tell you when I leave here, how many black people is in this room, how many what. It's not true. When someone wants you to not see color, what they're asking you is, whenever you're looking at opportunities and those kind of things, to not look at a job application and say, his goes in the trash, Jamar's goes in the trash can. So no one, as far as anyone that I'm around, doesn't want you to say, it was a black guy. I mean, you're gonna notice that. If you ask me where I sat today, I'm going to tell you I sat behind a guy with a ponytail. I saw his ponytail. So I just think people need to be more honest with themselves. Oh, it's 100% an overcompensation, but I'm saying it's not necessary.
Thank you. I'll chime in and I'll say, is that comment even necessary? Okay? Oftentimes, this is what we need to be very cautious about. Be very, very cautious about what we say. Even some of our comments, before we say it, think about it. You know, is it necessary to say? Some people feel like they need to validate whatever they're going to say. So here again, that you can't control, so that's where that acceptance comes in. I'm going to accept that whatever you say, and I'm going to respect that, but we're going to be able to have a respectful conversation so that we can embrace the differences here of understanding.
I think it's just a statement to say that I don't expect you to be a certain way because of your color. I want you to do the best job that you can do in the situation that you're in. It doesn't matter about anything else other than the fact that you're in our position, that you're sympathetic and you can build a relationship. That's really what matters.
And that goes back to that acceptance. You know, if you feel like that's something that you as an individual need to say, then the person on the other end, accept that. So that's that respect. You're trying to learn, I'm trying to learn, and so together we can make this a wonderful experience of diversity awareness.
I think for me, when I hear somebody say, I don't see
the color, or for a disabled person, I don't see your disability. There's an inherent bias to me in even saying that, because you're saying, I don't know how to put this without being really rude. You're saying I'm able to see this, but what do you see in me? I mean, we all have things that should be seen, that make us human beings. And I thought of that just a second ago when you said that, but what I really wanted to say was the name of this conference is perfect, Embracing Our Differences, because to me, I think the more you embrace that every individual you meet is culturally different. They might have a different faith. They might have a different background, might have a different nationality. That's the beauty of who we are, especially as this country is. We are of all things pulled together. And when you put up barriers about how you expect somebody else to be in your presence, you diminish everybody in your presence. And I think just opening up yourself to the idea that people are different. We are not all the same. But what I have found is in talking to people, we all have the same goals. We all want the best for our children. We all want the best for ourselves. We want to have a clean, comfortable home. We want to have food to eat. Our goals are all the same. It doesn't matter what our background is. And if you can bear that in mind when you are around people who are, and I'm putting air quotes around this, different than you, we aren't different. We really are fundamentally all the same. We want the same things.
Any other comments?
I do like what she just said. And I think with that, it shouldn't even be an introduction like that. We hear the term, love has no color, you know. I like what she said about everybody being different, whether it is African American, whatever. Wherever you come from is who defines you. Your experiences define who you are. So really, you know, you mentioned you gave the example about walking down the hall, and it may be someone who looks different than you are, but you don't even know that person. You are making prior assumptions. You're going off of that. That could be a person who you're supposed to talk to. You know, that could be someone that needs you to say hello, need a hug, you know, but you are making assumptions going off of your own thing, and you don't even know who they are. I have friends that comes from a lot of different places. I'll just say personally, but that's because I opened myself up to that. Being comfortable enough to open myself up to do that. So I think those biases, I think she said, we put those up a lot of times, and then they create boundaries, and then you can't reach anybody. Then you don't want to have relationships with those people. So I think we need to open ourselves up to that, embrace those differences, and then I think we'll create a better environment doing that.
I'd like to share with you when I was asked to present a diversity training. I tossed and turned for a few nights because I was trying to decide what is the most welcoming title that I could give a training that would embrace everyone, and people would automatically say, yes, I want to be there. Yes, but you have to give that some thought, because I definitely wanted it to be a training that would embrace everyone, and it was more welcoming. I want to welcome you to come to get this information. So I thought, embracing our differences. Then I thought, Well, so you embrace them, then what? What are we going to do? We need to have a mind change. So I thought embracing our differences, it's a mind change. So I want to say to each one of you as you leave, if nothing else be your takeaway, it would be that you are challenged to have a mind change about some of whatever your thoughts are of embracing the differences of individuals. Again, as I say, it's awareness. It's accepting that individuals are who they are. But can we have conversations that are very respectful? I am in the process of scheduling small conversations throughout the college campus with various departments, academic dean groups, departments there on that side, and when they have staff meetings and small meetings, because oftentimes it's more effective, as I stated earlier, when you're in small groups, because people tend to feel a little bit more comfortable because these are the individuals you work around every day. So you'll hear a little bit more about that as I contact the various directors of the areas throughout the campus and academic deans and coordinators. And again, I tossed and turned a couple of nights over that. So the title of those little conversations we're going to be having throughout the campus in little small groups, it is Bite-Size Diversity Conversations. So it'll give you an opportunity to engage with me engage with you, some of your concerns, some of the things we want to talk about. What can we do to make this college campus a more welcoming, inclusive, learning environment, not only for ourselves as employees, but for our students, and definitely be an example for the community. So I would like to say thank you again. There's an evaluation of this training, and they would like for you to leave it at the back table. And please, any concerns or questions that you have, please contact me as the Director of Diversity of this campus, and I'll do my best to try to answer it, get information for you. You do have handouts on microaggressions. Take a look at that, dig a little deeper, and take a look at yourself. Thank you. Have a wonderful weekend.